In this exercise, you were asked to read several sentences and for each one to decide whether it was a simple sentence, a compound sentence, a complex sentence, or a compound complex sentence. In addition, we threw in one run-on sentence for you to notice. Remember that a run-on sentence is an error, something you would need to correct if you wrote one in your own writing. Let's take a look at the first sentence in the exercise. Jazz is the greatest American musical form, and Duke Ellington is its greatest genius. Here we have two clauses, and both are independent clauses. Either of these could stand alone as a sentence. Jazz is the greatest American musical form. That could stand alone as a sentence. Duke Ellington is its greatest genius. That too could stand alone as an independent sentence. Therefore, we have two independent clauses which have been properly and correctly combined by using a comma and the word and. Therefore, we have a compound sentence in this case. Let's look at our second example. Although young women want to participate in sports as much as young men, women's sports often don't receive equal funding from colleges. Here we have a slightly longer sentence, but it's still fundamentally not too complicated. It really consists of just two clauses. Let's break it down into parts and analyze each one. The first clause is everything before the comma, and it reads, although young women want to participate in sports as much as young men. What's the verb in this particular clause? What word expresses action or being on the part of the subject? The verb is want, and the subject is women. Young women is the broader subject, but the simple subject is women. So the subject and verb in this clause is women want, and everything else in the clause is there to provide more information about what kind of women we're talking about and what specifically they want. Now, looking at that clause as a whole, could it stand alone as a sentence? The answer is no. It's a subordinate clause. It couldn't stand alone as a sentence, and again, there's a telltale sign. It begins with the subordinating conjunction, although. When you read this clause, you can see that something more is needed to make a complete thought. Although young women want to participate in sports as much as young men, therefore what? We don't know, and so by itself, this would not work as a complete sentence. Notice that although there are a lot of words there, it would still make a sentence fragment. So the word fragment doesn't necessarily mean a short or small number of words. It simply means that the words do not express a complete thought and therefore cannot stand alone as a sentence. So we have here a subordinate clause in the first part of this sentence. What about the second part of the sentence? Women's sports often don't receive equal funding from colleges. Here we have an independent clause. This could stand alone as a complete sentence. Don't receive is the verb, and sports, or women's sports, more broadly, is the subject. This could stand alone as a sentence, so it's an independent clause. So we have here a subordinate clause linked to an independent clause. The two ideas together make one complete thought, and therefore we have a complex sentence. Our third example reads, the tallest mountain in Africa, Mount Kilimanjaro, is the subject of a stunning new IMAX documentary film. Now, the first group of words in this sentence doesn't happen to be a clause. The sentence begins, the tallest mountain in Africa. Remember that a clause has to contain both a subject and a verb. Is there a verb here, a word expressing action or being? Not really. We simply have what could be a subject, the tallest mountain in Africa, but there's no verb there. So this is not a clause. It's a modifying phrase, again, a term that's not important for this conversation, but it's simply giving more information about what appears in the real clause, which is about to begin. Mount Kilimanjaro is the subject of a stunning new IMAX documentary film. Here is where the verb appears. Is the verb, and the simple subject is Mount Kilimanjaro. So in this case, this sentence consists of simply one clause, one independent clause, which is able to stand alone as a sentence. So this is a simple sentence. Again, notice the term simple sentence doesn't necessarily mean that the sentence is very short. There are quite a few words here, But because there's only one clause, it's a simple sentence. Our next example. The author Mark Twain was fascinated by technology. He was the first writer ever to deliver a typed manuscript to his publisher. Here we have two separate clauses, and both of them happen to be independent clauses. Either one could stand alone as a sentence. You can probably tell just by reading them. The author Mark Twain was fascinated by technology. We have a subject and a verb, and this could stand alone as a complete thought. He was the first writer ever to deliver a typed manuscript to his publisher. Here again we have a subject and a verb, and it could stand alone as a complete thought. We have two independent clauses then. Does that mean we have a compound sentence? No, because the rules for how you create a compound sentence have not been followed. The two independent clauses have simply been stuck together with a comma. So what do we have? We have a run-on sentence, and this is an error. It would have to be corrected either by adding a coordinating conjunction, such as and or but, or by substituting a semicolon for the comma in the middle of the sentence. In this case, using a semicolon would probably make the most sense, since and or but do not work particularly well as connecting words in this sentence. Instead, using a semicolon to turn this into a proper compound sentence would be a good way of correcting the run-on sentence. It would then read, the author Mark Twain was fascinated by technology, semicolon. He was the first writer ever to deliver a typed manuscript to his publisher. And that would be correct. Our last sentence reads, when I visited California last summer, I spent 1 week in San Francisco, and I visited the nearby Napa Valley with my cousin. Here we have three clauses. The first one, when I visited California last summer, is a subordinate clause. Perhaps you can tell that it can't stand alone as a sentence. It leaves us wondering what happened when I visited California last summer. It sounds incomplete, and it is. It is a subordinate clause and can't stand alone as a sentence. The next clause reads, I spent 1 week in San Francisco. This is an independent clause. It could stand alone as a sentence. The last clause reads, I visited the nearby Napa Valley with my cousin. Again, it's another independent clause, and it could also stand alone as a sentence. So in this case, we have a subordinate clause followed by two independent clauses. What kind of sentence does this make? A compound, complex sentence. So this shows exactly how these different types of sentences work, and I think you can see that combining independent with subordinate clauses in various ways gives you the flexibility to bring together in a single sentence ideas that are related to one another or that belong together and that add up to a complete whole. And the more practice you have in writing in English, the better you'll get at using each of these four different types of sentences appropriately in order to express increasingly complex ideas. Well, that concludes our discussion of sentence structure. You've learned about the basic parts of any sentence, about the most common types of sentences, and you've also learned about the errors that you need to avoid when constructing a sentence properly in order to earn high grades on papers that you might write for school, as well as to express yourself effectively and correctly in any writing that you do on the job or in any other life situation. I hope you found this program to be helpful, and you're invited to view the other programs in Video-Aided Instructions English Grammar Series in order to further strengthen your comfort level with the complexities of English grammar. Thank you for watching, and good luck in your future endeavors.